After 10 years of living together, my daughter told me she regretted letting me stay in her home. I didn't say a word, I just quietly walked away. Then one day, she happened to read my journal and broke down. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And tell me, what city are you watching my story from? I want to know how far it has traveled. I wake up before the sun, the way I have for decades. No alarm needed. My body knows. There's a stillness in the house that I've come to know better than any sound. The kind that wraps around you when everyone else is still dreaming or avoiding you." I make my way to the kitchen in my slippers, joints stiff, fingers curled from the cold and time. First, the coffee. Dark roast, double strength. Rachel likes it strong. Says anything weaker tastes like hot water. I always make it the way she prefers. She doesn't say thank you anymore, but I remember when she used to. I slice the bread, pop it in the toaster, and let it brown just past golden, the way Lily likes it. She hates anything soggy. I crack an egg into the skillet, flip it once, careful not to break the yolk, but I keep it cooked all the way through. No soft center. She can't stand anything runny. She said once it looked like snot. I never made that mistake again. I set the table. Fork, knife, napkin. I even fold the napkin into a triangle. Habit. That's all this has become. Habit. Stitched to routine. Stitched to silence. Rachel comes down at 6:30, dressed for work. Her heels click across the hardwood floor. She doesn't stop. "Morning," I say. She opens the fridge and pulls out her almond milk, shuts the door with her hip. No glance at the table. "I'll eat at the office," she mumbles, checking her phone. "There's toast, coffee, and eggs," I said. "I'll eat later, Mom. There's a meeting." She pours the milk into a thermos and leaves it on the counter while she fixes her blouse in the hallway mirror. She's already halfway back upstairs before I can say anything else. 10 minutes later, Lily shuffles in. Hoodie, sweats, hair in a messy bun. She's got one earbud in and the other dangling down. She flops into the chair, picks up the toast, barely looks at it. "Morning, sweetheart," I offer. She doesn't answer. Just scrolls through her phone and chews. No eye contact. The screen must be more interesting than her old grandmother. I pour her a glass of orange juice, place it near her elbow. She doesn't touch it. After 3 bites, she pushes the plate away and stands. "I gotta go. We're doing a math quiz. First period. Do you want me to pack your lunch?" "No, it's fine. Cafeteria's got pizza," and she's gone. I gather the plates, rinse them in the sink. I wipe the crumbs off the table and set the chairs back in place. The coffee's cold by now, untouched. I pour myself a cup anyway, though it's bitter and strong and tastes like something I'm not supposed to enjoy. It's been 10 years since I moved into this house. A whole decade since John passed. It happened so fast. He was standing 1 minute, then he wasn't. I still remember the way his coffee cup rolled on the floor. I kept that cup for years. Rachel told me back then, "You shouldn't live alone, Mom. It's not safe. Come stay with us." She said it like she meant it. I believed her. I sold our little house in Vermont, the one John and I built together, where we planted a cherry tree out front the summer after Rachel was born. I cried the day I left, but I told myself I was doing the right thing. Mothers do that. Move closer, give up space, give up rooms and names on deeds. I helped pay for this house. Not all of it, but enough. When we signed the papers, Rachel said, "I'll just put it in my name. It's easier with taxes." I didn't argue. It felt like family. I didn't need my name on a wall to feel like I belonged. But over time, I became just staying, like a guest that forgot to leave. Rachel told someone once at a backyard barbecue, "Yeah, my mom's been staying with us since Dad died." I was standing 10 feet away, carrying a tray of deviled eggs. She didn't flinch when she said it. I didn't correct her. Later that evening, I asked gently, "Why'd you say I'm just staying here?" She barely looked up from her wineglass. "Because you are right. I mean, it's not permanent. It doesn't have to be such a big deal, and maybe it shouldn't have. But it felt like I'd just been erased." Last year, the library down the street called. They needed volunteers, shelving books, helping kids with homework. I wanted to say yes, but Rachel was juggling deadlines. Lily had after-school clubs. Who would do the drop-offs, the pickups, the grocery runs? So I said no, just like I always did when the thing I wanted was going to be inconvenient for someone else. That afternoon, while folding laundry in my room, I heard Rachel's voice through the open window. She was out on the back porch, talking on the phone. I swear, If I could go back, I wouldn't have let my mom move in. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of always tiptoeing around. Her laugh was dry, sharp. I stood there, holding one of her sweaters, still warm from the dryer. I placed it on the bed, smoothed the sleeves, and folded it neat. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat on the edge of the bed and watched the ceiling for a while, letting the silence settle on me like dust. Later that evening, when she came back inside, I was setting the table. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. She nodded, scrolling through her phone. "I might eat later. I have to finish a report." Lily passed by, backpack slung over one shoulder. "What's for dinner?" "Meatloaf and mashed potatoes," I answered. She shrugged. "I'll just microwave something." Rachel didn't say anything. She just went upstairs. I scraped the plates into the trash before they even made it to the table. After I cleaned up, I sat alone in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea. I didn't light a candle. I didn't play music. I just sat there with the quiet and thought about how strange it is to feel invisible in a place where you've folded every blanket, cooked every meal, and memorized the footsteps of every person living above you. When you get old, nobody tells you the hardest part isn't the aches or the medications or the loneliness. It's realizing you've become background noise in the lives of the people you built your life around. Rachel passed by later that night, pausing at the hallway. "Hey," she said. "Thanks for watching Lily this week. She's been a handful lately." I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated, then went upstairs. No good night, just stairs, creaking under her heels. I didn't say anything that night. After hearing what Rachel said on the phone, I didn't storm into the backyard, didn't slam doors, didn't even cry. I just finished folding the last of the laundry, hung her blouse on the closet hook, and went downstairs like I always did. The house was quiet. Rachel was in her room, probably still on her laptop. Lily was finishing homework or texting someone. The TV wasn't on, and I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher I'd loaded earlier. At 8:17 p.m., Rachel sent me a text. "Can you pick Lily up from school tomorrow? I have a meeting." I stared at it for a few seconds, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed, "Sure." Just one word. No emoji, no love, Mom, just sure. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea and sat alone at the kitchen table. The overhead light gave off a soft yellow glow. I didn't bother wiping the sticky ring of juice Lily had left behind that morning. I just looked at it for a while. It was shaped like a crescent moon. I reached into the drawer by the fridge and pulled out my old leather-bound notebook. The cover's worn, soft at the edges. John gave it to me for our 20th anniversary. He always said, "You need a place to put the things you never say." I opened to a clean page. I wrote one line. I should have left a long time ago. And then I closed it. This wasn't the first time Rachel had made me feel like I was in the way. There was that morning I accidentally knocked over the almond milk. It spilled across the counter, down the cupboard door, pooling on the floor. I reached for a towel, but she beat me to it. "Mom, come on," she snapped, crouching down. "Could you be a little more careful? I'm exhausted from cleaning up after you all the time," I said. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she interrupted, "but it just keeps happening." She didn't yell. She didn't have to. There was another time I asked if she needed help with dinner. I said, "Want me to peel the carrots or something?" She didn't even look up from the stove. "Don't bother if you don't know what I like. It's more work for me to fix it after." I nodded, backed away. I stayed in the kitchen but didn't speak again. I watched from the corner, holding the edge of the counter like it might steady me. I used to think being useful was enough. 3 years ago, I got brave and brought up moving out. I found a small ad in the back of the community paper. Private room for rent. Shared kitchen. Quiet neighborhood. It was nothing fancy, but it looked clean, and it was close to the park. I showed Rachel the clipping one night after dinner. She raised her eyebrows. "What's this?" I said. "I thought maybe I could take a look, just see if it might work." She let out a sigh and set her fork down. "Mom," she said, honestly, "it's easier if you stay. I'd have to find someone to watch Lily otherwise." I waited, thinking maybe she'd offer to come see the place with me, but instead she said, "Don't make things complicated. We've got a system here." I smiled, nodded, of course. I was just thinking out loud. That was the last time I ever brought it up. The next morning, after I dropped Lily at school, I walked to the store for a new carton of almond milk. The cashier asked, "How's your morning going, hun?" I lied, "Just fine, thank you." I took the long way home, past the old post office, down Maple Street, where the leaves were turning red-orange. I hadn't taken a walk just for myself in months. There's a small park near the grocery store, a bench under a maple tree. I sat there, set the grocery bag beside me, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my photo gallery. Most of the photos were of Lily, her birthday cake last year, her at the school play, her Halloween costume as a ladybug. A few were of Rachel, though she rarely smiled anymore in photos unless someone else was holding the camera. Then I found it, a picture of Rachel when she was 12. Her arms wrapped around my neck, her cheeks flushed from running outside. She was laughing, one of those big, unfiltered laughs kids do before they learn how to hold things in. I remember John took that picture. We were at the lake. I'd made grilled cheese in the back of the van. I stared at the photo for a long while. My thumb hovered over the screen. I whispered, to no one in particular, "She used to love me like that." Then I pressed the trash icon. The screen blinked. "Are you sure you want to delete?" I tapped, "Yes," and it was gone. When I got home, Rachel was already out. She'd left early for her meeting. The house was still. I took off my shoes, put the milk away, and stood in the hallway, looking at the closed doors, hers, Lily's, mine. Each one felt like a separate country, with its own rules. I used to think of this place as a home. Now it just felt like a place I cleaned, cooked, and slept in. I picked up the laundry basket and started a load. As the machine started rumbling, I thought about how quiet things get when people stop seeing you. Not ignoring you, not exactly, just ... not seeing you, like a chair in the corner, like a plant someone waters but never notices blooming. That night, over dinner, Lily sat at the table, eating cereal. I said, "I could make you something hot if you're hungry." She shrugged. "I'm good." I sat down across from her. "How was school?" She didn't look up. "Fine, you say anything at the assembly." "I didn't go. We had a sub." I nodded, watching her stir the milk in her bowl even though the cereal was almost gone. Rachel came in just as I was standing to clear Lily's bowl. She dropped her bag on the counter and looked at the sink. "Mom, could you make sure the dishes get done tonight?" she said. I looked at the clean sink. "Already did." "Oh." She glanced at me briefly. "Thanks." Then she disappeared upstairs. That night, I opened my notebook again and wrote nothing new. I just looked at the sentence from before. I should have left a long time ago. I underlined it once, hard, then I closed the book and turned off the light. Nothing has changed since that day. I kept cooking. I kept doing the laundry, folding their clothes, picking Lily up after school. I did it like I always had, like I hadn't heard my daughter say she wished I'd never moved in. I moved through the days like nothing had changed, even though something had. Saturday morning, I got up early and started on the mushroom soup Rachel used to love as a girl. She was 7 the first time I made it. She had the flu and wouldn't eat anything else. I remember her sitting at the table, cheeks flushed, telling me, "It tastes like being hugged." So I cleaned the mushrooms carefully, sliced them thin, browned them in butter. I let the broth simmer low and slow, just the way she used to like it. Added chopped onions, garlic, bay leaves. I stirred the pot gently for almost an hour. Near the end, I tossed in fresh parsley, just enough to lift the smell, not overpower it. At noon, I set the table. I laid out bowls, napkins, even a plate of saltines in case Lily wanted something to dip. The house smelled warm, earthy, and full, like a place with history. Rachel came downstairs just as I was wiping down the counter. She had her phone in one hand and her car keys in the other. She didn't stop walking. "What's that smell?" she asked, glancing toward the stove. "I made mushroom soup," I said, trying to sound casual. "Your favorite, remember." She didn't smile. She opened the fridge, pulled out a plastic container, and said, "I'm gonna eat this salad upstairs. Don't cook too much, Mom. I'm trying to keep things light." She walked back up without another word. Lily came down 10 minutes later. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table, poking at the soup with her spoon. "You don't have to eat it if you don't like it," I said. "It's okay," she said with a shrug, slurping a spoonful. Then she set the bowl down. "I've got homework." She disappeared up the stairs. I sat there alone, with a full pot of soup and 2 untouched bowls. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel hungry. I just felt ... empty. Like the house was going on without me, and I was just floating somewhere behind it. I washed the dishes slowly. Not because there were many, there weren't, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. The sponge was starting to fray. I made a mental note to buy another. Then I paused. Why? Why buy more if no one noticed whether I scrubbed the sink or not? I took off my apron, smoothed it, and hung it on the same hook I'd been using for 10 years. It still had a little flower print on the pocket, faded now. I stood there for a while, watching the steam rise from the soup. Then I ladled some into a Tupperware, let it cool, and slid it into the fridge. I didn't write a note, I didn't label it, I didn't expect anyone to touch it. That evening, I went back to my room. I keep my space small, tidy. There's a chair by the window, a dresser, a little bookshelf. The walls are bare, no photos, no decorations, just quiet. I opened the top drawer of my nightstand and took out the old sewing box I've had since Rachel was a baby. Tucked beneath the spools and thimbles is a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded blue ribbon. Letters from Evan, my son. He moved to Oregon 5 years ago for a job. He writes me real letters, pen on paper. He says writing makes him feel closer to me, like we're having a slow conversation that lasts longer than a phone call. I untied the ribbon and picked one at random. The envelope had a little coffee stain in the corner. I recognized his handwriting immediately. It was dated 6 months ago. Mom, I wish just once you'd live for yourself. You deserve to. You really do. I know you love us, but I don't think you remember how to love your own life anymore. I remember reading that line the first time and folding the letter right then and there. Like it hurt to look at. Like it was accusing me of something I couldn't defend. But now it felt more like truth than accusation. Maybe I didn't understand it then, or maybe I just didn't let myself understand. The next morning, I stepped into the backyard early. Dew still clung to the leaves. I took the kitchen shears and headed toward the garden. I'd planted too much again. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, rows of herbs, more than any 3 people could ever eat. I used to love feeding the house, but now I couldn't tell if they noticed when something came fresh from the garden or not. I cut back the kale first, then the basil, snipped half the parsley, dug up 2 carrots. I packed half the vegetables into paper bags, walked to the neighbors' houses, knocked politely. "Morning, Mrs. Green," I said when she opened the door. "Got some extras from the garden." "Oh, bless you," she said. "My grandson's in town this week. He loves your cucumbers." Her words made me smile. Not big, just enough to remember I was still a person to someone. When I got back, I looked at the fridge. The Tupperware with the mushroom soup was still there, untouched. I didn't throw it out. I just left it. Maybe tomorrow I'd take it to Sylvia's. She always liked my cooking. I didn't tell anyone where I went that morning. I didn't leave a note when I came home, and no one had asked where I'd been. I realized I didn't need to anymore. Not for them. There comes a time when you stop making things for others. Not out of anger, but because no one noticed you were making them at all. A few days after the soup, Lily came home from school, all smiles. "I got picked as team leader for our group project," she said, tossing her backpack on the couch. I looked up from the laundry basket and smiled back. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." She didn't hug me, but she looked genuinely pleased, and that was enough. It had been a while since I'd seen her excited about anything besides her phone that night. As I folded Rachel's blazer and placed it neatly on her bed, I thought about doing something small, just to mark the moment. A breakfast, maybe. Something warm and a little special, like we used to do on birthdays and last days of school. I knew they didn't care much for big gestures anymore, but I did. I missed the feeling of setting a table with intention, of sharing something that wasn't just fuel. I woke up early the next morning, even earlier than usual. The sky was still navy, and the house was asleep. I tied on my apron, the one with the faded little blue flowers, and pulled the good butter out of the fridge. It was French butter, thick and yellow, wrapped in gold foil. We'd bought it the one time Rachel took me to that fancy grocery store across town. I'd put it in the back of the fridge, saving it for something nice. This felt like the day. I mixed the dough slowly, folding and pressing it by hand. I let it chill, rolled it out, folded again. The croissants needed time, and I gave them that. While the dough rose, I simmered marmalade on the back burner. Orange slices, sugar, a bit of lemon zest. It filled the kitchen with a sweet, slightly bitter smell that reminded me of summers in Vermont. By the time the sun came up, I had the table set, napkins folded into triangles, silverware laid out properly, fork on the left, knife on the right, a glass of orange juice at Lily's place. A cup of black tea for Rachel, steeped just how she likes it. Coffee for me, kept warm on the stove. It looked beautiful, not extravagant, just thoughtful. I stood there a moment, taking it in. I told myself, this might be the last time I do this. Rachel came down first, dressed sharp and in a hurry. She paused at the foot of the stairs, glanced at the table. She frowned. "Mom, did you bake these this morning?" I nodded, hopeful. "I thought we could celebrate Lily a little." She shook her head, reached for her purse. "You know I'm not eating gluten right now." "I used the French butter," I said softly. Rachel sighed, opened the fruit bowl, and pulled out a banana. "I've got a meeting at 8. I'm just grabbing this." "Tell Lily I said congrats." "Okay." She walked to the door, then called out, "Don't go overboard with meals, Mom. We're trying to keep it light." The door clicked shut. Lily came down a few minutes later. She had earbuds in and one sock half on. She sat down, took a bite of the croissant, chewed once, twice, then set it down. "It's crunchy on the outside, but kinda chewy in the middle." "Grandma," I smiled, told her to grab some milk. She poured herself a glass, drank it fast, then stood up and headed for the stairs. "Gotta finish my math," she said. As she passed through the hallway, I heard her talking softly on the phone, probably to one of her friends. She giggled. "Yeah, my grandma made a full breakfast again, like a whole setup. It's like a movie scene, or something. Her food's kinda old school though, not really my vibe." Her voice faded as she walked away. I didn't move for a while. I just sat there at the table, hands folded. I wasn't angry. That was the strange part. I wasn't hurt, either. Not the sharp kind of hurt. It was more like being cold. A quiet kind of cold that seeps into your bones before you even notice it. I cleaned up slowly. The plates weren't dirty, really. Just a few crumbs and a halfy croissant. I poured the marmalade into a small jar and placed it in the fridge. I rinsed out Rachel's teacup even though it hadn't been touched. Then I picked up an old mug with a small chip on the rim, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. John's mug, the one he used every morning. Brown with a faded green stripe. I held it for a long time before placing it gently back on the top shelf. I should have thrown it out a long time ago, but something in me couldn't. That afternoon, Rachel sent me a text. "Mom, can you cook light tonight? I'm not feeling that hungry." I stared at it for a minute, then slid my phone back into my pocket. I didn't text back. I didn't go to the stove. Instead, I opened the fridge, pulled out a single-serve yogurt, and stood by the sink eating it with a spoon. No plate, no tablecloth, no celebration. Just me and silence, and the hum of the dishwasher I hadn't run. That night, I didn't turn on the lights in my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, trying to remember the last time Rachel had thanked me for a meal. Not out of habit, not polite, really thanked me. I went back in my mind. Christmases, birthdays, school plays. There were plenty of times she ate, but I couldn't remember the words. I closed my eyes and thought harder, dug deeper. Nothing. After that morning when Lily picked apart the croissant, Rachel didn't say anything. No comment, no follow-up, just a thumbs-up emoji that evening when I texted, "Do you have a dinner preference tonight?" That emoji sat there on the screen like a shrug from across the house. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I deleted the message. After that, I stopped asking. No more "Do you want soup or salad?" No more "Should I set 3 places or 2? Something in me had quieted for good, not in anger, but in clarity. Like realizing the door had been open all along and I'd just never walked through it. That week, I started noticing the things I actually used, not the things I was keeping for the sake of keeping. A worn-out blue sweater I always reached for on chilly mornings. A small picture frame, just one, of me with Rachel and Evan. Rachel was about 8, I think. Missing her 2 front teeth and clinging to my side like she never wanted to let go. It sat behind a few other frames in the hall cabinet, dusty and slightly crooked. I took it out and brought it into my room, propped it on my dresser. I didn't cry. I just looked at it and said to myself, that was a good day. A few nights later, after everyone had gone to bed, I climbed up to the attic. It was cold up there, still air, no insulation. Dust tickled my throat. When I moved in, Rachel said I could store a few things up there, but just in the corner. "Mom, this house barely has space as it is." I remembered that. I always remembered the tone more than the words. I found the boxes easily. I had labeled them myself. Books, John's winter coats, misc photos, linens. I sat down cross-legged and opened the book box. The smell hit me first. Old pages, cedar, and something faintly like pencil shavings. I opened one hardcover, an old copy of The Old Man and the Sea, and a slip of paper fell out. It was a bookstore receipt, yellowed with time. On the back, John had scribbled something in his messy handwriting. She reads carefully, chooses books like she chooses friends. I smiled and folded the paper gently. I slipped it into my coat pocket. That one I was keeping. The next afternoon, Rachel left for a business trip. Just a day, she said. I've got to fly out early and be back late. Lily's staying at Mia's for the night, so you'll have the house. Her tone was matter of fact. I nodded. After she pulled out of the driveway, I closed the door and turned the lock quietly. Then I walked into my room and turned on the small CD player I kept hidden under the bed, a collection of classical piano, Debussy, mostly. It played softly, barely loud enough to hear from the hallway. I took out the suitcase, not a new one, the old brown one with worn leather corners and a handle that squeaked when pulled. The same one I used to bring on visits to my sister in Oregon. Evan used to joke that the bag looked heavier than the person pulling it. I smiled at the memory, then laid the suitcase open on the bed. I packed slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to do it right. I folded my clothes by category: sweaters, shirts, pants. I laid my notebook flat under a layer of scarves, slipped the old frame between two blouses so it wouldn't break. I added the tube of face cream I'd been saving for years, the one I always thought was too expensive to use, and kept unopened in a drawer. I stood there holding it for a moment and said out loud, "It's mine." Then I put it in. I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. No jewelry, no dishes, no photos I hadn't brought. I left the wedding silver in its case, the heirloom quilt in the hall closet, the safety deposit box key where it always was, in the back of the drawer, under Rachel's utility bills. I wasn't taking memories that didn't want to be carried. When the suitcase was packed, I slid it to the corner, by my bed. I didn't hide it, but I didn't display it either. It was early evening. I walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge, took out a carton of eggs, a half bag of spinach, and put it all on the counter. Then I stopped. Instead of cooking, I sat down with a glass of water and looked around. The kitchen still smelled faintly like citrus from the candle I'd burned the week before, the one no one noticed. I stood up, went to the notepad on the side of the fridge, and tore off a blank piece. I took a pen and wrote, "Thank you for letting me stay these past 10 years. I'll be leaving the way I came." No name, no date, no plea. I folded it and taped it to the inside of the fridge door, behind the egg carton. Somewhere she'd find it eventually, but not right away. Somewhere quiet. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, suitcase beside me. The classical music had stopped playing, and the room had gone still, but I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel afraid. What I felt was something closer to breath, to finally exhaling after holding it for too long. Not quite joy, not yet peace, but something like relief. Sometimes the act of leaving doesn't start with a goodbye. It starts with a quiet folding of shirts, a note left in a fridge, and the choice to stop waiting to be seen. I chose Monday. Rachel had a full day of meetings, and Lily had early gym class, which meant the house would be up and moving by 6, then empty by 7. That kind of morning leaves no room for goodbyes, and I needed it that way. I got up at 5. The sky outside was still dark, just a soft blue creeping along the edges of the windows. I turned on the stove and cracked one egg into the pan. I cooked it just how I liked it, medium, no salt, edges just starting to crisp. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black, and sat at the table. No rush, no checking the time, no one asking if I remembered to pack a lunch, or grab a jacket, or refill a water bottle. For the first time in a long time, I was eating just for me. The quiet wrapped around me like a blanket, not heavy, not cold, just enough to hold the moment still. I showered slowly, letting the water run hot over my back, longer than usual. I didn't rush through the towel drying, the hair. I took my time with the little things, brushing my teeth, putting lotion on my arms, slipping on my socks. I dressed simply, white blouse, soft slacks. I tied the pale blue scarf around my neck. Evan had given it to me on my 60th birthday. "Soft as your spirit," he'd said, laughing as I'd unwrapped the box. I didn't believe him then, but I carried the scarf with me always. That morning, I wore it like a quiet shield. At 6:30, I heard Lily's door open. She thudded down the stairs, half-dressed, mumbling something about not finding her gym shoes. Checked the laundry room. I called from upstairs. Still in my room. Got it, she said back, already moving away. I stood still until I heard the front door shut behind her. Rachel was next. Sharp heels, fast pace. She didn't say good morning. Don't forget to take the chicken out of the freezer, she said, passing the hallway where I stood. I didn't answer. She didn't wait. The door slammed again. Silence. I waited 10 minutes, just to be sure. Then, I rolled my suitcase gently toward the top of the stairs. The wheels squeaked softly, but I lifted it when I reached the steps, one stair at a time. No thuds, no bumps. Just the soft breath of movement in a sleeping house. At the bottom, I paused and looked around the kitchen one last time. The dish rack held 2 clean mugs, drying from yesterday. The wall clock ticked without hurry. I went to the dining table, placed a small glass jar in the center. Inside, dried lavender from the garden I used to tend out back. I tied no ribbon around it. I left no card. I didn't want the house to feel empty after I left, even if no one noticed when I was there. I had scheduled a taxi the night before. I'd found a local number online, called quietly from the backyard after dinner. Pick up at 6:45, I said. 1 passenger, just 1 suitcase. Got it, ma'am, the young voice on the other end replied. The car pulled up exactly on time. A small white sedan. The driver stepped out. A boy, maybe in his early 20s, polite, didn't talk too much. I liked that. He opened the trunk and lifted my suitcase in like it weighed nothing. Need help with the door? He asked. I shook my head. I've got it. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house, just for a moment. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I already knew every line of that front porch, every crack in the steps, every smudge on the storm door. You only turn around when you're unsure. I wasn't. The car pulled away slowly. The street was quiet. Just a few porch lights on and sprinklers turning in someone's front lawn. I reached for my phone and typed 1 sentence to Sylvia. I'm on my way. She replied a minute later. Room's just like the last time you saw it. I smiled to myself. Questions, no drama. Just the space waiting. The drive wasn't long, maybe 45 minutes, but it felt suspended in time. I didn't look back once. I stared out the front window and let the road carry me forward. When we reached Sylvia's place, the driver opened the trunk. You visiting family? He asked casually. No, I said, reaching for my suitcase. I'm going home. He didn't ask more, just nodded and got back in the car. Sylvia lived in a modest 1-story house on the edge of town, tan siding, a porch swing, and a wind chime that rang soft and steady in the breeze. She stood in the doorway, holding a mug. Well, she said with a smile, you made it. I walked up the steps and into her arms. Inside, the guest room was just as I remembered. Twin bed, floral quilt, 1 wooden chair by the window. My suitcase still sat unopened by the door. I didn't touch it. I sat on the bed, placed both hands flat on my lap, and just breathed. No one called my name. Number 1 asked where I was, and yet, for the first time in years, I felt like I was somewhere I was meant to be. That night, I didn't turn on the light. I didn't unpack. I didn't even reach for my journal. I just sat there, letting the quiet fill the space. And as I closed my eyes, 1 sentence rose in my chest. I just walked out of a life where no one remembered to value me. Leaving isn't always about running away. Sometimes, it's about returning to yourself. I didn't sleep much that first night at Sylvia's. The guest room was small, just a single bed, a nightstand, and a narrow window looking out onto her rose garden. The walls were pale blue, the kind of color that doesn't ask much of you. Sylvia had left a folded towel at the end of the bed, and a pot of chamomile tea still warm in its cozy. When I came in with my suitcase, she didn't ask any questions. She didn't say what happened, or, are you okay? She just touched my shoulder gently and said, bathroom's at the end of the hall. Make yourself at home, hun. That was enough. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't take off my coat. I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands in my lap and stared out at the garden. The roses were just stems this time of year, brittle, brown, holding the memory of blooms. I thought, that's me, still shaped like someone who used to open up, but the emptiness I felt, it wasn't from missing someone. It wasn't from being alone in a quiet house. It was from having to admit finally, that my own daughter no longer saw me. Not fully. Not as a person. And I'd let that go on too long. After a while, I reached for my suitcase. I unzipped it slowly and pulled out the small leather-bound notebook I'd carried for years. The corners were worn, and the elastic band had long since stretched out. I used to keep school notes in it when I worked as a secretary at the high school. Lists, reminders, things to do. Inside the front cover, my own handwriting greeted me from decades ago. Write it down, or it disappears. I laid it on the nightstand and took out a pen. The page I opened to was blank. I took a breath and wrote, "I don't need permission to exist." That was it. One sentence. But it felt like I'd drawn a line in the sand, a line I should have drawn years ago. The next morning, I awoke before the sun again. Old habits die hard. I padded out to the kitchen and found Sylvia already at the sink rinsing berries. She turned and smiled. "You didn't sleep much." I shook my head. "Not really." "Tea's fresh," she said. "And there's bread on the counter if you want toast." I poured myself a cup and stood beside her. She nodded toward the knife in her hand. I was going to peel these apples. I reached for one. "Let me help." She glanced over. "You don't have to." I smiled quietly. "I know. I just don't like sitting still." That was true. But it was also different now. At Rachel's house, I'd worked to avoid being seen as a burden. Here, I worked because it gave me peace. Later that morning, I walked to the local farmer's market. It wasn't big, just a few tents, a coffee stand, and a row of folding tables set up along the sidewalk. A woman with gray streaks in her ponytail and a denim apron called me over. "Want to try some pickled carrots?" she asked, holding out a toothpick. I smiled and took one. "You made these picked M this morning, jarred M before lunch." She winked. "Gotta stay ahead of the frost." They were tangy, crisp, and bright. I nodded and reached for my wallet. "I'll take a jar." I also picked out a small bunch of asters, purple, thin-petaled, gentle. I wanted something in the window, something that bloomed just for me. That afternoon, I opened my phone and stared at Evan's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button for longer than I'd admit. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of, his judgment, his pity, his disappointment. But when I finally pressed call, none of that came. Just his voice. "Mom." I swallowed. "I moved out today. I'm okay." There was a long pause, not a heavy one, just quiet. Then he said, "Do you need anything?" "No," I answered. "I don't need anything. I just wanted you to know I'm safe." He didn't press. "Okay. You know I'm here, right?" "I know," I said. "I know, sweetheart." That night, back in the little room with the pale blue walls, I opened the notebook again. I turned to the next blank page and wrote one more line. "Each day I live isn't for someone else's comfort. It's for my own becoming." Then I placed the pen on top of the page and closed the book softly. Not everything needed to be written down yet, but I had started, and that, I think, was the first honest step I'd taken in years. When you stop waiting for someone else to name your worth, you begin to see yourself clearly, even in silence, especially there. It had been a full week since I left Rachel's house. No calls, no questions. No one asked where I was. I didn't expect anything. Not really. But still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Right there in the back of my throat. Like a lump that wouldn't go down. Each day at Sylvia's passed quietly. We had our tea in the morning, took short walks in the afternoon, cooked dinner together in the evenings. There was no schedule, no tasks, no one asking for anything. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I heard a kind of silence I hadn't known before. Not the lonely kind. The kind that tells you you've finally stepped out of someone else's shadow. On the 8th day, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. First message I'd gotten from her since I walked out the door. "Where are you? Why have you been gone so long? There's too much going on at home." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button. But I didn't type anything right away. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea, peppermint, not chamomile this time, and took it out to the porch. The sun was setting behind Sylvia's pine trees. The breeze was soft. I watched a squirrel run across the fence, acorns tumbling in its path. Life went on. I didn't need to rush this. The next morning, after breakfast, I finally wrote back, "I'm fine. And I don't want to return to a place that made me feel like I didn't exist." I didn't add an emoji. No punctuation. No warm sign-off. Just truth. Plain and without dressing. I set the phone down and went on with my day. 2 days passed before she messaged again. I'm overwhelmed here. You can't just disappear like that. Lily's been asking where you are. I read it while standing at the kitchen sink, drying dishes. I typed back, when I was there. No one asked if I was even present. Then I turned the phone face down on the table. No fight. No guilt. Just fact. That afternoon, Evan called. Hey mom. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, and just that one sentence nearly undid me, but I kept it together. Hi sweetheart. I heard from Rachel, he said gently. She's well, she's trying to figure things out. I didn't answer that. I want to come visit, he said. I paused, looked down at my hands. They were clean, wrinkled, quiet. I took a breath. Not just yet, I said. I'm not ready to explain anything. You don't have to, Evan said quickly. I just wanted to see you. No, you're okay. I'm okay, I told him. I really am. There was a pause on his end. Then, softly, I'm proud of you, you know. Tears came to my eyes, quick and surprising. I blinked them away and smiled into the phone. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. That evening, Rachel texted again. This time, longer. I think I got too used to you always being there. I didn't realize you could leave. I guess I thought you'd just always ... be. There was no apology. Not in words, but something had shifted. Her tone, the weight, the quiet way she finally acknowledged that I'd been more than just convenient. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because sometimes silence is its own kind of answer. And I didn't want a sorry that came with a pull to return. The next morning, I walked into the little used bookstore in town. It smelled like old pages and linoleum, the kind of place where no one hurries. I browsed the back shelf and found a notebook with a soft blue cover. No lines, just blank pages. Smooth paper. Simple. I bought it without thinking twice. Back it, Sylvia's eye sat at the table by the window and opened it. The first page stayed blank for a moment. Then, I picked up my pen and wrote, This morning, I made breakfast for one, and that one was me. It wasn't much. Just oatmeal with cinnamon and a slice of apple. But I ate it while sitting down, with music playing, no rush, no questions. It wasn't about what I ate. It was the way I made it, with care, for no one but myself. That night, I flipped open the blue notebook again and stared at the blank page. I could have written a list, could have made a plan. Instead, I wrote another sentence. Every little thing I do from now on is mine. Not for praise, not for permission, but because I want to. And just like that, the day felt whole. When they stop calling you, when they stop needing you, it hurts. But when you stop needing to be needed, that's when you begin to feel free. It had been nearly a month without a word when Rachel finally texted me. But today, I unexpectedly received a message from her. I cleaned out the attic and found a few of your boxes. If you want them, I can leave them out front for you to pick up. No greeting, no how are you, just business. I stared at the message for a while, long enough for the phone screen to dim and turn black. I didn't reply right away. 3 days passed. Then, one morning after breakfast, I typed back, I'll come by Friday, 3 p.m. No need to wait outside. That was all. I packed a small canvas bag, just enough for the ride, a notebook, a sweater, my reading glasses. Sylvia stood by the door as I tied my shoes. You sure? She asked, her voice soft but steady. I nodded. I'm not going to stay. Just picking up what's mine. She didn't press, just patted my shoulder and said, You come back when you're ready. The bus left at 11:45. I sat by the window, hands in my lap, eyes on the road. I didn't think much, didn't rehearse anything in my head. I wasn't returning to talk. I wasn't returning to prove a point. I was going back to close a drawer that had been left open too long. When the bus pulled up near the house, I stepped off slowly. My feet hit the pavement like I was stepping onto a stage I hadn't walked in years. The house was the same, mailbox still crooked, front lawn slightly overgrown, a soccer ball tucked under the porch swing, but I wasn't the same. I stood on the sidewalk for almost 2 minutes, just breathing, just looking. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a moment of stillness before stepping back into the air I used to breathe. Rachel opened the door before I could knock. She looked thinner than I remembered. Not sick, just tired. Her hair was pulled into a bun, no makeup, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. She said nothing for a second, then stepped aside. Come in, she murmured. I left your things at the foot of the stairs. I stepped just inside the door, not past the hallway. I let the light from outside fall behind me. It felt like standing at the edge of something I no longer belonged to. I saw the boxers stacked by the wall, labeled in my handwriting. Books, MOM, photos plus cards, craft supplies. I knelt and opened the top box. Inside were my old cookbooks, a few paperbacks with folded corners, and a small framed photo of Rachel, Evan, and me, Christmas morning, years ago. Beneath that, a box of Christmas cards I'd handwritten, some unopened, some still sealed in their envelopes. I ran my hand gently across the top card. To Rachel, you make being your mom my favorite thing I've ever done. I didn't say anything. Rachel stood across the hallway, one hand gripping the hem of her sweatshirt. Her voice cracked slightly. I read the notebook you left behind. I looked up. I didn't ask why. I didn't scold her. I just waited. She took a breath. I didn't know you felt that way. About everything. She looked down, then back at me. Every page I read, I felt smaller. Not because of you, because of me, because I never looked. Not really. She crossed her arms over her chest, like she was holding herself together. I thought you needed us to give you a reason to stay, but it wasn't that. You stayed out of love, out of loyalty, not because you had no place else to go. Her voice caught, but she didn't cry. I didn't see that. I didn't see you. I stood up slowly, box in hand. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't reach out. Some things aren't meant to be smoothed over in a single moment. I said, I stopped being the mother of this house a long time ago. I just didn't know it yet. Rachel blinked, but didn't look away. I stayed, I said, because I forgot I deserved more than being useful. I forgot I was still someone, even when no one said my name. I picked up the second box. It wasn't heavy, just old photographs, knitting needles, and scraps of a life that used to fill a room. Rachel didn't move. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg me to stay. She just stood there like a child who realizes, too late, that they've been left standing in the doorway. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. I looked back once, not to offer comfort, not to soften the moment, just to leave a truth behind. I'm not asking for your love, I said. I just hope that one day, when someone gives you the kind of quiet love I did, you'll know not to ignore it. Then I stepped into the light and let the door close behind me. You don't always leave a place to punish someone. Sometimes you leave because you finally remember who you are. When I got off the bus back in the little town, it was almost dark. I could tell Sylvia had something on her mind before I even made it up the porch steps. She was leaning on the railing, both hands wrapped around a steaming mug of cinnamon tea, the kind that leaves a soft warmth behind your nose. She raised her eyebrows at the sight of my bag and said, "You went and came back all in one breath, huh?" I set the bag down, dusted my hands on my jeans, and sat beside her. Didn't need to stay long, just needed to walk in as myself and walk out the same way. Sylvia nodded, her silver gray hair brushing her cheek in the breeze. "You got your things, and my dignity," I said, with a half smile. She didn't ask anything else. That's the thing about old friends. You don't need to explain silence to them. They know how to sit with it. Later, I unpacked slowly. I laid the old photographs on the bed, one by one. In one, Evan is 3. His curls stuck to his forehead after running through the sprinkler. In another, Rachel's wearing a paper crown from a fast food birthday party, her cheeks stained with ketchup. I smiled at the memory but didn't frame it. I did frame a photo of John, sitting on our porch swing in Vermont, with the morning paper in one hand and coffee in the other. He wasn't looking at the camera, just off into the trees. That quiet kind of contentment men like him carried deep in their bones. I missed that look. Sylvia knocked on the door and peeked in. "Want to walk down to the diner for pie?" I looked at the photo in my hand. "I think I'd rather bake one." She chuckled. "Well then, let me know when it's ready." That night, I took the old recipe card out, the one John wrote in his left-handed scrawl, "Peach cobbler for Maria," because she hates store-bought. I peeled the peaches slowly, listening to the old radio Sylvia kept in the corner humming out a Spanish bolero, the house filled with the smell of brown sugar, cinnamon, and something that reminded me of Sunday evenings when the world seemed a little quieter. While the cobbler baked, I opened my blue notebook, the one I bought for no one else but me, and wrote, "I baked for the joy of it, not the praise." And it tasted sweeter than it ever did before. The next day, I wandered through the town market with a canvas bag over my shoulder. A woman selling potted herbs waved me over. "You look like someone who needs rosemary," she said, smiling. "Why rosemary?" I asked. She shrugged. "Smells like memory. Good or bad. It'll bring you somewhere." I laughed, took the small plant from her table, and said, "Then I'll take the one with the strongest roots." In the afternoon, I received a message from Lily. It was unexpected, but not unwelcome. "Grandma, are you mad at us?" I told Mom, "I miss your toast, even if it was always too brown." I stared at the screen, rereading it. There was no manipulation in her words, no guilt laced through the letters. Just a girl missing something that used to feel stable. I called her. She answered fast. "Grandma, I'm not mad, sweetheart," I said gently, "but I needed space. You understand?" There was a pause. "Mom's been weird. She bought a frozen lasagna last week, and then forgot to turn the oven on." I smiled. "That doesn't sound like her. She's trying. I think she's confused, too. She's not good at saying she's sorry." "I know," I said. "She never was, even when she broke her brother's toy and blamed it on the dog." Lily laughed, a real laugh. "I knew it. Mom always made the dog look guilty. I always knew," I told her. "But sometimes it's easier to let someone come to the truth on their own." She paused again, then said, quieter, "If I came to visit, would you make your croissants?" I thought for a moment. "If you help me roll the dough," I said, "I'll teach you the secret to getting the layers, right?" Her voice lit up. "Deal." Later that evening, I found Evan sitting on the porch swing. He had driven in while I was still on the phone with Lily. "You didn't call first," I said, stepping outside with a glass of lemonade. He shrugged. "Didn't want to give you time to say no." I handed him the drink. "Clever." We sat quietly for a while, watching the wind stir the pines. Then he said, "You look lighter, different." "I feel different," I said. "I think I finally learned to sit still without waiting for someone to need me." He turned toward me. "You were always more than needed. I just didn't say it enough." "I didn't say it either," I admitted. "I kept showing it, in casseroles and laundry and carpools. That was your love language. And I think I deserve to have my love spoken back to me once in a while." Evan nodded slowly. "You do." That night, before bed, I sat by the window in my room. The lavender I planted had started to open, just a little. It made the air smell like calm. I opened the blue notebook and wrote, "I'm not waiting at a window anymore. I'm standing in the doorway of my own life." And beneath that, one more line: "Loneliness is when you don't belong anywhere. Wholeness is when you belong to yourself." I may not have a house full of voices calling my name, but I have music playing while I bake. I have plants growing where nothing grew before, and I have peace. I am not alone. I am whole. For so many years, I believed love was silence. It was unconditional patience, the quiet acts of cooking, folding blankets, and never asking for recognition. Until one day, I realized I had lived too long as a shadow in the very house I once called family. I came to understand that love should never mean being forgotten. Don't wait until your heart grows cold to realize you deserve to live for yourself, not just exist to please others. So, if it were you, if you quietly cared for everyone, only to be met with indifference, what would you do? Would you keep sacrificing, just to stay, or would you walk away to find yourself again? I want to hear your answer. And believe this: God always blesses those who dare to choose themselves.